Judicial Service Commission will this week be interviewing some of the top jurists to fill vacant positions at several superior courts across the country. The interviews will take place in Sandton, Johannesburg. The conduct of commissioners during these interviews has drawn criticism from several groups. Last year, the JSC was taken to court and ordered to redo the interviews for the Constitutional Court bench. SABC News reporter Hasina Gori has more.
The judicial system plays an integral part in the democracy of a country and upholding a constitution, and those that are tasked with ensuring the top jurists are appointed to the benches of the country have a really huge responsibility. The Judicial Service Commission is tasked with that specific objection, and they are set to sit here for the rest of the week, appointing and interviewing shortlisted candidates for some of the appellate and the higher and superior courts of the country, including the Constitutional Court. They have faced a criticism over the years with the handling of this interview process, with some criticism coming towards certain of the commissioners, as well as the manner in which the interviews were being held. Some legal analysts have accused them of having no consistency in the manner in which interviews were taking place, and that some nominees found themselves sitting for quite an extensive time, while others seem to have quite a quick round. We've seen calls for guideline to be upheld. We've also seen last year during the interview process, which took place in April 2021, we saw that process being taken to the courts, and that interviews then redone once again. I want to bring in with me Judges Matters and Bekazeli Benjamin. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. Let's start with, what is the role of the Judicial Services Commission, and how are they formed, and how are those that are appointed to it chosen?
So the Judicial Service Commission is an institution that is set up by the Constitution. Its role is to appoint judges to the courts, but also to discipline the judges when they commit misconduct. The Judicial Service Commission's structure is provided for in the Constitution, and it is supposed to be composed of judges, of practicing lawyers, of members of parliament, about 10 of them. There's also a legal academic, professor of law. There's also 4 representatives that are nominated by the president, and those representatives are usually practicing lawyers themselves.
We've heard the criticism that they've faced, during the processes, both last year as well as during the Chief Justice process as well. As Judges Matters, what was some of the criticism that you felt that the JSC should be doing better at?
So one of the loudest criticisms that we've heard about the JSC is just the inconsistency in how it performs its job of interviewing candidates. We've seen over the years a fluctuation of the issues that are taken up. Some of them are irrelevant towards finding out whether someone is suitable to be a judge. Others are really an opportunity for the politicians or the lawyers to sort of bring in other issues that are not related to the process. And so that has been the biggest criticism, and there have been members of the JSC that have been singled out for criticism, people like Dalim Pofu, Julius Malema, and others. But what we've seen now, and coming into this session, is a commitment by the JSC to change. We've seen that they've set aside today to discuss the mandate of the JSC, and that's important because it's an opportunity for the JSC to reflect on what has happened over the last few years and to change the way it does things. The 3 things that we as Judges Matter have put forward as the things they need to change is for them to have a clear criteria. So the JSC should be able to tell us what exactly they are looking for when they are interviewing people. We also want them to have rules of procedure. So there should be ways that will guide the way in which the JSC receives information and how it deals with it in the interviews. Thirdly, we want for there to be rules or code of conduct for the commissioners themselves. We have seen in the past that this process has been abused, and we want that kind of abuse to not happen again, and a code of conduct will help in doing that.
Talking of a code of conduct, one of the loudest criticisms, during the Chief Justice process was that calls for commissioners like, Advocate Darlene Mpofu as well as Julius Malema recused themselves because they were facing their own disciplinary proceedings, or they were also, their conduct was, brought to call. We've seen now changes being made, when we're coming into this setting here today, the first session being that specifically the mandate, being discussed and created. What are some of the other changes we're seeing coming into this interview process?
So I think the two big changes is the chairperson of the JSC. Justice Zondo has started as Chief Justice, and he will be the chairperson of today's session and for the rest of the week. And we've seen that in October when he chaired the session, it was much more respectful, much more dignified, and focused on the task of finding only the best lawyers to be judges. The second change is there are two new commissioners that have joined. It's Advocate Sesi Baloyi and Advocate Kameshni Pillay. And those were, one of them, Advocate Pillay, was nominated by the practicing advocates to sit on the JSC. The Advocate Sesi Baloyi was nominated by President Ramaphosa to sit on the JSC. And both women are very well known, especially in the Johannesburg bar. They have huge reputations for integrity, for forensic skill, for being able to advance transformation, but in a much more focused way. So those are some of the positive changes that we're seeing in this session.
Going into tomorrow's interviews, we are going into the Constitutional Court interviews with 5 nominees, quite respected and top jurists of the country. One of the issues that you just spoke about, transformation, will be coming under the light. For the first time, I think, we've seen so many white male candidates, being interviewed. And this was a question, that was brought up to Chief Justice Zondo when he was, being interviewed around transformation. What do you think is the role when it comes to the judicial system right now, when it comes to transformation? Are we seeing enough of it? And what does transformation really mean when it comes to judiciary?
So the Constitution itself sets up what transformation should look like. The first is that the people who are appointed to be judges must be appropriately qualified, and they must be fit and proper. So that means that these people must have the skills, the experience, the integrity, and must have the values that are in line with the Constitution. Secondly, the Constitution says that the judiciary must look broadly like the racial and gender composition of South Africa. We know that our country is a majority black country, majority women country, so our judiciary should try and reach those targets, but it shouldn't be a strict numbers game. So the first and foremost, we must try and, as much as possible, to find the excellent people to be judges, and then we must look at how should they reflect the population of the country. And I think there have been lots of great strides that have been made. About 40% of our judiciary is made up of women. In 1994, there was only one woman as a judge. We are having more black people coming on as judges. In the Constitutional Court, we haven't had white judges for a couple of years, and in this shortlist, there are 3 of the 5 candidates are white men. So it will be interesting to see how the JSC deals with that question. But all of the 5 candidates that are shortlisted for the Constitutional Court, there's no question that they are excellent.
Thank you so much. That was Judges Matters and Mbeki Benjamin speaking to us here at the Hilton in Sandton, Johannesburg, where the Judicial Services Commission is hosting a week of interviews. As we heard today, is a closed session where they will be discussing a session on their mandate, an issue that has really come under light. They've faced heavy criticism around having no clear rules and guidelines when it came to the criteria of looking for specific judges for the different courts, as well as the conduct of both commissioners, as well as the questions that they pose towards those that are shortlisted. So it's going to be quite interesting to see what comes out of this closed session, as well as tomorrow, where it begins with 5 candidates being interviewed for 2 positions at the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court is the apex court of the country and has not seen a full bench of justices in quite some time. We know that now Chief Justice Raymond Zondo is the chairing this session. We're also sitting at the helm of that court. It's going to be quite an interesting week here as they interview some of the top legal minds of this country to ensure that those rights and responsibilities that are enshrined in our Constitution is enjoyed by every South African. We'll keep you up to date as this week continues, but for now, back to you in studio.